Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Tuesday, December 24th. It is Christmas Eve, and we've got some Jets news to talk about here on the podcast. This is episode 455 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. I just want to start off by wishing everybody tuning in, all Jets fans, a very happy and healthy holiday, Christmas, all that good stuff. Obviously, great time of year. New Year's coming up as well. So just want to wish everybody a happy holidays. Today, though, we've got some Jets news to discuss. Want to talk about just some injury updates on Olu Fashanu. Got some good news on him earlier today. And then really what I wanted to get into mainly on today's episode is two head coaching candidates that I would not hire if I'm the New York Jets. In fact, I would stay far away if I am the New York Jets. So we'll get into that as well here. As always, though, before we begin, let me tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sports book. If you're looking to get in on any of the betting action, NBA, NFL, all that good stuff, NHL tomorrow, you've got NFL games on, you've got NBA games on, ton of Christmas Day action. College football playoff is in full swing, bowl games, you know it. There's so much going on this time of year. Use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits up to $2,000. Also, our friends over at SeatGeek, you're looking to get out to any awesome events, use promo code Bubs on Sports for $20 off your first purchase. Get yourself out to some great events, and as always, look for the green dots. Those are the good deals. And of course, Huga House, if you're looking to get any of their awesome selection of hats, check them out and use promo code Bubs for 15% off any purchase. And when you use that promo code, you get 15% off your first hat. And if you use the promo code, you then also get 30% off your second hat. So check them out and get yourself some nice Huga House swag. So here we go, episode 455. Just some quick housekeeping things right off the bat here before we get into the main topic of today's show, which is two head coaching candidates, or two names that have been brought up for the New York Jets head coaching vacancy that I would stay far away from, and to be frank, would be absolute disasters if the New York Jets hired either of these candidates, which we'll get to. We do have some injury updates, and it's actually good injury updates. Obviously, as we know, Olu Fashanu, rookie left tackle, rookie stud for the New York Jets, and what has been such a disappointing season, has been one of the lone bright spots on this team offensively and defensively overall. He's been excellent. Left the game, didn't look good. We got carted off, couldn't put much weight on it. You feared as a Jet fan, maybe it was an Achilles, something major that could potentially affect him next season, affect him, moving forward here. But that's not the case. He has plantar fasciitis, and it won't require surgery, despite what Jeff Ulbrich had to say earlier today, where he felt it would require an operation. The Jets have now come out and said it won't require an operation. So he'll be ready to roll. He'll be good for spring. He'll be good for spring workouts, OTAs, mini camp, training camp, all that good stuff. Just a couple weeks to heal up. He'll miss the next 2 games, but considering what could have been, this is relatively positive news for a guy that has looked really good and feels like you've got your answer at left tackle here for the future, right? Played 15 games this season, 5 games he started at left tackle. He also had 2 starts at right tackle, also played some games at right guard. It was the first time in his career he played games at right tackle and right guard, and he looked really good, right? In his 6 games played at left tackle, he allowed just 1 sack, 12 pressures on 230 pass blocking snaps. Really recently, he's been excellent. Had a really good game against Jacksonville, was excellent against Seattle, really strong game against Miami. Up until his injury on Sunday against the Rams, looked really, really good. He's a wall. His pass protection's been phenomenal. We knew, a lot of people, I said on this podcast, and a lot of people, draft experts, everybody was saying he was the best pure pass blocker in the draft. His run blocking needed some help, and that's why Joe Alt was kind of the consensus number one because he was a better run blocker and just a better overall tackle than Olu. But in terms of pure pass blocking, pure pass protector, Olu was the number one from that perspective. And he's shown it. He's been excellent. He's been awesome. And his one sack in 6 games played or in 15 games played this year is least among rookie offensive tackles who have played in double-digit games. So some of his numbers rank up there among some of the top at his position in his draft class. So really, really positive. And this is also a big positive, too, for the next regime to come in here and know that they've got their answer at left tackle. And that is huge to solving this whole puzzle of trying to turn this thing around. Is you need a quarterback, you need a left tackle. They've got one half of that puzzle solved, which they haven't been able to solve in a very long time. So Olu, positive injury news there. Will miss the final 2 games. But what we saw this season was really, really promising and just really positive that he won't have that this won't impact him in the offseason. Couple weeks off, he'll be ready to go for offseason workouts, all that good stuff. And we'll be ready, of course, once 2025 week 1 rolls around. Rodgers also just quickly here, he will play against Buffalo. Just had a press conference a little while ago. He said he's 100% playing. Ulbrich sounded a little less optimistic. Rodgers is out there. He's made it clear he wants to play all 17, so nothing really new on that front. And those are your main Jets injury updates here on a Tuesday. A little bit of a different week, of course, for them with the holiday here tomorrow. Now, the main premise of this show is I wanted to get into, and I've been talking about this a lot, just trying to find the day with the bombshell report last week. Had a ton of content from that. So this topic I've kind of pushed back a little bit, wanted to get into it, but every time like I was going to do a pod on it, there was something else that popped up. So here we are, Christmas Eve. I want to get into 2 names, right? We've talked a lot about names that we would want the Jets to go after. You guys kind of know my list. Mike Vrabel is my number 1. And to me, Vrabel's like my 1, and then there's like a gap, and then it's my 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 guys. To me, like it's Vrabel. I want them to do everything they can, everything in their power, even if it means bringing Vrabel in and then letting him choose the general manager. That's how high I am on Mike Vrabel, that I would do it. I would bring him in and let him do that. Now, we haven't talked much about guys that we would stay away from. And there's been 2 names that have been linked to the Jets that I want nothing to do with. And I think most Jet fans would want nothing to do with. So here are the 2 names. I'm going to start with the first one. I would probably say I would be more against this guy maybe than the other guy I'm going to go with, but I'll start with the first one. Matt Nagy. He's been a name that's popped up this coaching carousel, spent the last couple seasons with Kansas City, feels like he might throw his hat back in the ring, feels like he might get an interview for a couple teams as a potential second-time head coach. And to me, Matt Nagy screams Adam Gase 2.0. This would be a same old Jets, typical Jets move if we said, hey, go hire a guy with previous experience, and their guy is Matt Nagy, who was a disaster in Chicago, and the only reason people are now bringing his name up again is because he's being carried by Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid as the offensive coordinator in Kansas City. Listen, we know what it is to be an offensive coordinator for the Kansas City Chiefs, right? Everybody was so high on Eric Bieniemy a couple years ago. He leaves to go to Washington to be the offensive coordinator and is now gone. He was a nobody there. Because being the offensive coordinator, being a quarterback's coach for the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes is not a very difficult job, not a job where you have a whole lot of control. That's an offense that is led by Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. This, to me, screams Adam Gase 2.0 just because of that fact of you look at their timelines, they're very, very similar. Right? You look at Adam Gase's timeline. He was in Denver with Peyton Manning. That was all Peyton Manning. None of that offense was Adam Gase. He was carried by an all-time great quarterback. That's what that was, right? He leaves Denver. He goes to Miami, makes the playoffs once, wasn't very good, got ran out of town in Miami, and then comes to the Jets and was a disaster. We know 2-14, 9-23 in 2 years. We don't need to rehash the Gaze era. We all know what took place. That was his timeline. You look at Matt Nagy's timeline, a little bit different, but very similar. Goes to Chicago, makes the playoffs twice, doesn't win a playoff game. The reason they made the playoffs was not because of him, not because of the offense. It was the defense, which I'll get to some numbers here in a second, but gets ran out of town in Chicago, fails the quarterbacks there, now goes to Kansas City, is getting carried by an all-time great quarterback and an all-time great head coach who's an offensive mind, who calls the plays. And now we'll get another opportunity. If he comes to the Jets, it would be so similar. It would be Gaze 2.0. They get ran out of town in one place. They both have experience of working with an all-time great quarterback who just carries them. And then they get another coaching job and it just doesn't work out. Matt Nagy would be awful. Stay away. And I'll get to some numbers here on why. And I know you look at Matt Nagy and you say to yourself, oh, well, he made 2 playoff games. He made 2 wild cards. Well, that was because of the defense. Those Bears teams were carried by their defense. And the offenses under Matt Nagy they were always below average. For an offensive-minded coach, he never had an offense that ranked in terms of yards per game, ranked inside the top 20. He was always 20 and below. And I think what was most alarming about Matt Nagy's tenure in Chicago was the fact that Mitch Trubisky got worse every single year. And in year 1 with Justin Fields, it didn't work out. And of course, we know what has happened to Justin Fields. Never worked out in Chicago after they hired Eberflus. They move on, get Caleb Williams. Fields is in Pittsburgh. He gets benched. Russ comes in. His career has never worked out. But you look at Matt Nagy, 2018. Yeah, they went 12-4, lost the wild card game. But guess what? The offense ranked 21st in the NFL that year, 343.9 yards per game. But the defense was 3rd in the NFL. They were allowing under 300 yards per game. They were 299.7, one of the elite defenses in the NFL. So the offense was 21st, but they were carried by a 3rd-ranked defense. So that was year 1. Let's go to year 2. The offense got significantly worse. It went from 21st in 2018 down to 29th in 2019, where the team went 8-8 and missed the playoffs. The defense in 2019, well, they were 8th in the NFL. Let's go to 2020. Another 8-8 season. Got into the playoffs, weak NFC. They finished that year 26th in offense, 11th in defense. Lost the wild card game. Let's go to 2021, where things really bottom out. 6-11, missed the playoffs. Nagy gets fired. His offense finished 24th in the NFL. The defense finished 6th. They had a top 11 defense every single season, including 2 years or 3 years where they were top 10, 1 year where they were 3rd, and they could not win a playoff game because their offenses were 21st, 29th, 26th, 24th. Whose fault is that? Matt Nagy. He ruined Trubisky. Trubisky never panned out. He got worse each year. Fields came in, never panned out. You cannot go after Matt Nagy. You look at Gaze's tenure in Miami, was a disaster. Offenses were never good, got ran out of town. The only reason Adam Gaze ever made a name for himself in the NFL was because he was the offensive coordinator for Peyton Manning, who carried him. Matt Nagy's starting to make a name for himself again, or people are starting to say, oh, Matt Nagy, just because he's getting carried by Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. We've seen what this guy is as a head coach. His teams were always carried by their defense. The offenses were never good. And for an offensive-minded coach to come into this market after getting ran out of town in Chicago would just be Gaze 2.0. It would. And again, I talk about, right, the offensive coordinators. You look at the coordinator. You look at the last hot offensive coordinator come out of Kansas City. It was Eric Bieniemy. How did that pan out in Washington? Didn't pan out at all. It failed. And you can't put Nagy, after seeing what happened with Trubisky and Fields, you cannot put Nagy in control of a rookie quarterback and Jordan Travis, right? Those two guys to develop. No way can you have him develop those quarterbacks. You can't do it. You cannot do it. So Matt Nagy's the first guy. Out of all the coaches that you can think of, Nagy would probably be my lowest target. He would be the guy that I would be most upset with. Now, my second coach that I would not go after, and this is a more interesting name. I would actually say this is probably more realistic than Matt Nagy, just because Rich Cimini talked about it on one of his podcasts and said that to watch out for him as a dark horse. The Jets also have connections to this guy from this past offseason when Robert Saleh tried to hire him as an offensive consultant before he took the offensive coordinator job for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's Arthur Smith. I would stay far away from Arthur Smith as well. You look at Arthur Smith, 3 seasons in Atlanta, 21-30, was basically the definition of mid, like average. Not even average, below average. Every single year he finished 7-10. That ended up 21-30, 3 years, and he got shown the door. He missed the playoffs every single season. He has gone to Pittsburgh, and sure, the offense has looked better, and Russell Wilson has played better and all that stuff. But I think Arthur Smith, we've gotten to the point now of this guy is a solid offensive coordinator, but not a good enough head coach. And again, where the Jets are now, you cannot take a risk on one of these retreads that didn't work out and then say, bring him in offensive mind, just like you did with Gase. You can't do that. You need like a proven guy with proven experience, proven winning experience as well. And that's why I bring up a name like Vrabel as my top guy. I know you're going to look at Flores and say, oh, well, what did Flores do? Well, first of all, Flores got a little bit of the raw end of the stick in Miami, and Flores also had 2 double-digit win seasons in Miami, which neither of these coaches I'm bringing up now did. Also, Flores went to Minnesota, has been excellent there from the defensive perspective. Feels like he's learned from his mistakes. Nagy and Smith are different from the perspective of both got ran out of town, and especially Smith from never even finished above 500 any years. And Nagy, just track record wise, it's not going to work out here in New York. So Arthur Smith, 3 seasons with Falcons, right? I talk about just the offensive rankings here, right? An offensive minded coach. Let's take a look at where his offense is finished. 2021, they went 7-10, missed the playoffs. Offense finished 29th in the NFL. 2022, 7-10, missed the playoffs. Offense finished 24th in the NFL. 2023, 7-10, missed the playoffs. Offense finished 17th in the NFL. So in 2023, the offense did get up to inside the top 20. But come on now. And I think one of the most scary parts of the whole Arthur Smith thing is we all know how it ended in Atlanta, right? It was not using his playmakers, not properly using Bijan Robinson. Where the Jets are at a point now where you have Garrett Wilson, who's clearly upset. You have Breece Hall, who's not getting enough carries. A guy that would probably be the absolute worst from a perspective of getting these young guys involved would be Arthur Smith because of the way it went down in Atlanta. Last year, he never properly used Bijan Robinson. And the Jets need a coach. They need an offensive staff that's going to properly use Breece Hall. Because we can all agree, Breece Hall in his 3 years here has not been used to his full potential. He hasn't been. And Nathaniel Hackett last year came out publicly and said he didn't know he was much of a threat in the receiving game. I mean, he's basically got coaches that don't even fully know his strengths and weaknesses. The Jets need a offensive staff that knows how to properly use Breece Hall. One of the scariest parts of the Arthur Smith tenure was the mishandling of Bijan Robinson last year in his rookie year. And now you're seeing what Bijan's doing this year with a much better offensive staff and a lot more opportunities and proper use. He's 5th in the NFL in yards, 5th in carries, tied for 11th in touchdowns, is one of the better young running backs in the NFL, one of the better running backs, period, right now in the NFL. So you just, from that perspective, you see an upset Garrett Wilson. You see Breece Hall, I'm sure, is not happy with his carries. And he's even mentioned on social media, which, by the way, needs to stop, but hashtag free 20. He's clearly upset as well. You're telling me you bring in Arthur Smith, that's going to make those two guys happy, realizing the guys that he misused in Atlanta, Bijan Robinson specifically? Forget about those guys staying here long term. Forget about it. They're out of here. They're not going to want to be a part of that. Plus, we literally just got over a head coach that was the definition of basically 7-10. Like, Arthur Smith had 3 7-10 seasons in his 3 years. Robert Saleh went 4-13, 7-10, 7-10, and in this year they were what, 2-3. I could probably make a case that if Robert Saleh was the head coach of this team right now, they probably finished 7-10. So, how much of a difference record-wise are you going from Arthur Smith to Robert Saleh, or from Robert Saleh to Arthur Smith? Two coaches that know a lot, that know all too well how to go 7-10. So just record-wise, not good enough there either. And I understand, right? He's taken a Pittsburgh offense that finished 17th in 25th in the NFL last year, and this year they're 19th, which isn't great, but it is better. But still, you just look at the way it ended there in Atlanta, and the Jets can't go after these guys that are failed offensive minds that got ran out of town in these previous places. They can't do that. They can't, especially if they're going to try and draft and develop a young quarterback. You don't want Arthur Smith in charge of that. You don't want Matt Nagy in charge of that. You don't, and you can't. Or else you're going to run into another situation, just like the Jets have, where 3 years from now, we're talking about drafting another quarterback, looking for a new head coach. Matt Nagy screams 2 years and out. He screams like 4-13 year one, and then like 5-12 year two, and he's out of here. Arthur Smith screams like a Robert Saleh type tenure, where year one he'll go like 5 or 6 wins, and then he'll go like 7-10, and they'll give him year 3 and say, oh, all in this year, and then he'll go like 7-10, and he'll be out of here in 3 years. Like, he just screams mediocrity. Not bad enough to get a top pick, not good enough to make the playoffs, which is kind of the whole Robert Saleh tenure in a nutshell. That's what Arthur Smith screams. Nagy screams complete incompetence. Arthur Smith screams mediocrity, which neither is what the Jets need. They don't need either of these guys. I will also say this. The whole Arthur Smith-Kirk Cousins combination, I mean, if that happens, I don't know what you do. I don't. You bring in Kirk Cousins and you hire Arthur Smith and you let those two guys run the show in 2025. You kidding me? You kidding me? There's not going to be a single soul in MetLife Stadium on week 1 if that happens. It's not. And I know he's got the connection, right? He's got the connection with the Jets from wanting to hire him, but no way. No way. And you could sit here and say, oh, well, look at his quarterbacks. Yeah, I understand he worked with Matt Ryan in 2021 when Matt Ryan was washed. I understand he had Mariota, Ritter, and Heineke, all that stuff. But 7-10, 7-10. The offenses were never good enough. The teams were mediocre at best. The Jets can't hire mediocrity. They just can't. This hire is too important to go after a guy like Nagy, to go after a guy like Arthur Smith. 2 guys that failed in their previous destinations. And now you're going to bring him here and expect them to succeed in this market, with this fan base, with this roster, with players that are clearly impatient right now that want to win now. It's not going to work. Not going to work. So those are 2 coaches I would avoid. There's, of course, others, but those are 2 guys that I would be furious if they hire. Those are 2 guys that I think would get the reaction of when Adam Gase was hired. When Adam Gase was hired, it was, most of the fan base hated it. not most, the entire fan base pretty much hated it. I hated it. We all hated it. In terms of like that reaction, you would get that type of reaction, I think, if you hired Nagy and Arthur Smith. Either of those guys. Vrabel, Flores, Todd Monken. I'd even take a chance on a Kingsbury before any of those guys. Again, I would take a chance on one of these first-time coordinators. Like I said, Monken, Ben Johnson, I just don't see it happening. I think he's going to Chicago. But Aaron Glenn, those type of guys. But, these, if you could give me 20 coaches, these two guys, Nagy and Arthur Smith, would be 19 and 20. No chance. So let me know what you think down below. What are your thoughts on these two names I brought up? And what are maybe other names that you would not want to bring in if you're the Jets, or names that you want to bring in? All that good stuff. Anything you got down below. As I said, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all of you. Hopefully you have a healthy and happy holidays with friends and family. We'll be back Thursday. Later on Thursday, we'll have a episode up with a Bills content creator. So take the day off tomorrow. Enjoy time with your friends and family. Again, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to all of you. We'll be back Thursday with some content previewing Jets Bills. So stay tuned for that. And yes, until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.